remain well below a long-standing pledge made by the richest countries. Long ago, they promised to increase development aid to 0.7% of their national income. The current level is around 0.3%, and the smallest proportion, just 0.1% of the national income of the richest countries, goes to the least developed countries like Malawi. In India, where the largest number of the poorest people in the world live, there'll also need to be a radical shift. Economic growth here has increased inequality. And everywhere, private industry will clearly have a big role in development. Mobile phones have transformed Africa, but the challenge is to ensure that the profits from businesses like these are transparent and do stay in the developing world. Business and governments in the developed and developing world will need a new impetus if they're to change things in a world where a fifth of the population go to bed hungry every night.
President Mutharika, 15 million people in Malawi. You now manage to feed them all. Malawi even exports food to other African countries. Did you get the support you needed at all times in order to achieve that?
No, I did not. Initially, there was opposition. So I made the point that...
to who? I mean, when you say you didn't get the support you wanted, these are people outside of Malawi.
To the international community, to the World Bank, and to everybody else, that I will introduce subsidies with or without their support. Because initially, there was definitely objection. Because the tendency is to say we should go through market, let the market trains or market forces work. You don't have market forces where there's no market. It
was $60 million, wasn't it, though? A lot of money for Malawi. Could you really afford it? Did they not have a point?
Well, basically, that's the argument. And I felt that, an ordinary woman in Malawi couldn't afford even 20 kgs of fertilizer. And without subsidies, they could not produce enough food for themselves, let alone beyond subsistence.
Robert Zoellick, you weren't president of the World Bank at this time, but has the bank learned from its past mistakes? Does it now listen to the needs of governments in developing countries that this kind of thing wouldn't happen now?
Well, I hope so. I think it's critically important to always be open to your clients and try to understand what works and invest in that and learn what doesn't work and stop that. I think in the Malawi case, though, as you said, it occurred before I came on, but when I looked into it, I think one of the issues, and this shows some of the difficulties, was whether it was for free or whether it was subsidized. And I think there was an acceptance of subsidization, but the question is, should the fertilizer be for free? Now, these aren't always easy calls because, as the President knows, if you use something for that purpose, you're not using it for something else. But as a general principle, as you said and the President said, I think the approach from the development community has got to be to try to be sensitive to the clients, but also bring experience from elsewhere.
We did not go in for free fertilizers, but they were subsidized.
Okay. Yeah. Esther Brimmer, from the US State Department, United States, lead nation in so many things. Where are you, though, on the MDGs? President Obama, first African-American president, hasn't he just spent one day in the last 2 years in sub-Saharan Africa?
President Obama has made the commitment to the Millennium Development Goals very early on. One of the first things he did was acknowledge the importance of development issues. As you know, the United States actually signed on to the original Millennium Development Goals in 2000 when they were laid out and adopted by the United Nations. And very early on in his administration, President Obama said that the Millennium Development Goals were America's goals, and that we would work to align our development assistance with the MDGs. This has been an important part of our thinking as we look at the Millennium Development Goals.
He may have said it at the beginning, though, Esther Brimmer, but we haven't really heard his voice very much since.
Actually, I'd suggest a few places to listen. And I highlight some of our particular initiatives. In particular, I would highlight food issues. Food and nutrition have been central to the U.S. activities over the past 18 months. And I would highlight particularly the Food Security Initiative the United States has taken with the international community and with the United Nations. We have actually pledged $3.5 billion over 3 years to support food security and nutrition issues. And this has actually leveraged additional resources of over $22 billion for the international community to support food issues.
Charles Abigray, you lead efforts in Africa for the UN Millennium Campaign to try to ensure that both rich nations, developed nations and the developing countries meet these goals by 2015.